Distinguished speakers, guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Elena and I have the pleasure of hosting today's event, a workshop on South Asia's challenges and opportunities in sustainable energy transitions. This event is jointly organized by the Energy Studies Institute and the Institute of South Asian Studies, both research institutes at the National University of Singapore. Please note that this event is audio and video recorded, and it will be available online later on the Institute of South Asian Studies YouTube channel. Kindly, a gentle reminder to switch off your mobile phones and other electronic devices. Thank you. To begin the proceedings, I would like to invite Professor Ang Beng Wah, the Executive Director of the Energy Studies Institute in the US, to deliver the welcome remarks. Professor Ang, please.
Okay, thank you. Professor Syed, Munir Khasru, Chairman of the Institute for Policy, Advocacy and Governance. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. It is my pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to you on behalf of the Energy Studies Institute and the Institute of South Asian Studies, the co-conveners of this workshop. As mentioned, my name is Ang Beng Wah, surname is Ang, not Wah, and I am the Executive Director of the Energy Studies Institute. At the Energy Studies Institute, we conduct policy research on local, regional, and global energy trends to promote understanding of energy development affecting Singapore. Our partner, the Institute of South Asian Studies, is dedicated to research on contemporary South Asia and seek to promote understanding of the regions. We are very excited to be working together to develop a collective understanding of energy policy and developments in South Asia, an extremely important topic for the region and the world. This workshop will focus on South Asia's challenges and opportunities in sustainable energy transitions. Participants will discuss a number of very important issues. They include transition of energy supplies from fossil fuel to renewables, the political economy of energy, climate change and low carbon economy, and drivers and limitation of electrifications in South Asia. We are honored to welcome such a diverse group of international and local experts to participate in this workshop. In a modern society, energy is needed for both production and consumption purposes. It is used to produce goods and services in the industry, commercial and transportation sectors. It is also consumed in the household sector to maintain and improve the quality of life. Historically, there has been a strong correlation between energy consumption and economic growth, especially in the developing countries. Global energy consumption has continued to rise, although the growth rate has declined somewhat in recent years. Demand from developing countries is the main drivers of this growth. According to some recent study, energy demand in non-OECD countries is expected to increase by between 50% and 100% in the next 25 years. This works out to be an averaged annual growth rates of between 1.5% and 3%. Home to almost a quarter of the world's populations and composed of developing countries with growing economies, South Asia is a region that will require vast and ever-increasing amounts of energy to support its economic growth. How to satisfy this increase in a reliable, economical, and sustainable way are challenging issues. Critical energy policy decisions are currently being debated and implemented across the regions. These policy decisions have to address not only pressing local issues such as energy poverty, energy access, and air pollution, but also international challenges such as transboundary energy trade, energy-related carbon emission, and climate change. National governments in South Asia are therefore tasked with a wide range of responsibilities. Currently, coal is the cheapest but also the most environmentally unfriendly energy source. India has recently overtaken the United States as the world's second largest coal consumers, of course after China. And its coal consumption is expected to continue to grow in the decades to come. And yet, earlier this month, at the COP23 climate talk held in Bonn, Germany, about 20 countries pledged to phase out coal usage by 2030 as part of a new global alliance called the Powering Past Coal Alliance. If India is successful in substantially increase its renewable energy capacity as planned, growth in its demand for coal will be reduced. It is challenges like this one, balancing the costs and benefits of various energy technologies and sources that South Asia is facing today. As meeting energy demand domestically become practically impossible for any country in the regions, cross-border electricity trade can be an attractive and viable solution. Yet, a set of problems, such as political issues resulting from commercial risks, hard and soft infrastructure problems, and technical details of planning and standardization can undermine this potential. Expansion of renewable energy sources and energy efficiencies are two well-known pillars of energy system transformation that helps reduce a country's carbon footprint. Country experiences, however, have shown that such a transformation, also known as deep decarbonization, cannot be achieved easily. Renewable technology requires good integration. Cost of financing is relatively high for developing countries, and policy and regulatory uncertainty is typically pervasive. Similarly, improving energy efficiencies require everyone, individuals, businesses, and governments, to take coordinated actions, which is often challenging. This workshop brings together experts to examine the above-mentioned and other challenges and opportunities in South Asia. As South Asia as it embarks on the path of sustainable energy transitions. I would like to wish all of you a productive workshop. Next, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Syed Munir Khasru. The topic of his address today is South Asia's regional integration through energy connectivity. He will share his thoughts on the role of energy as a vehicle of peace in the regions. Professor Khasru is the chairman of the Institute for Policy, Advocacy and Governance. He is a regular contributor to leading international media outlets such as the Straits Times, South China Post, Oxford Analytica, Nikkei Asian Review, and the Times of India. It's really international, all over the countries. Right? And MBA graduates of the Wharton School of Business, University of Pennsylvania. Professor Khasru is a well-respected strategic thinker and policy analyst. He is a well-known speaker on issues related to international relations, regional cooperations and integrations, security, and governance. He also advises governments and international organizations. Most recently, he took part in the Asian Development Bank's Roundtable for the Energy Leaders of Asia, the 10th South Asia Economic Summit, the 16th Asia Security Summit, and the 4th Asia Research Forum. Please join me in welcoming Professor Khasru. Is that here or to the podium?
I'm fine, I think we can follow.
Okay, I leave it to you.
Mr. Ang Beng Wah, Executive Director, thank you for your kind introduction. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure and privilege for me to be joining you on this occasion. I'll give you a little bit of background. When this initiative started a few months back, my friends at ESI were asking me what are some of the topics that we might focus keeping South Asia in mind. The first thing that clicked my mind, let's face the reality. The reality is South Asia is one of the least integrated regions in the world. The reality is, in spite of having so many potentials, in the eyes of the world, we are becoming a big talk shop. We are not walking the talk. And we are shying away from telling things which needs to be told. And the reason Mr. Ang was kind enough to mention my presence in the international media. That is one of the areas where you can go out and let the world think what many people like me and we are thinking. Where this project syndicate is Straits Times, it gives us a voice. So, looking into South Asia, in my opinion, the low-hanging fruit from where we can probably start connecting is energy. Of course, that I will share with you in my presentation. But just to give you a background, why I'm here and what has been the purpose. Having said that, I would safely assume most of you are familiar with the basics of South Asia and energy, so I will not dwell too much time. But I will touch base on some issues just to make sure we put things into context. Then hopefully share some insights what can be done and what has been done, and again some of the roadblocks which has stopped South Asia from exploiting its potential. So that's more or less what I intend to do, and more importantly, I look forward to hearing your opinions. It's supposed to be an informal interactive session, and I intend to do it that way. So I am pretty confident this is a room where we can afford to be free and frank with each other, and we'll take advantage of that. Moving on, Jordan, you're there. So this is the mental mapping, how I intend to do it. Look at the integration issues, then potential of energy trade, roadblocks, energy for growth trade MPs, and a roadmap how South Asia can probably move forward. Now, looking at some of the challenges and the low integration, because when we talk about low-hanging fruit and we talk about poor connectivity, we also must have a quick look why things are not moving as they should have been. This region houses almost 1/4 of the world's population, and currently is the fastest growing region in the world, because many of the other regions, East Asia and Europe, is mature. But even though contribution to the global GDP is 3.8 or about close to $3 trillion, this is one of the most least integrated regions in the world. So that is the reality, again, the background of which we are meeting here today. Plain and simple, if you look at the bar charts, it speaks the story. If you look at the amount of days it takes to import and export, and if you look at the documents needed, it tells you the level of bureaucracy and time inefficiency we are dealing with. And it's so interesting, just by going on an average, it takes 20 times more for India to import anything from Pakistan than from Brazil. So this is the kind of stark reality South Asia is currently embedded in. Now, many factors, I'll touch base on some of the key. This region historically has been very closely tied, culturally, socially. But the reality is, mobility here, particularly labor mobility, is very low compared to Asia Pacific. There is not any well-divided mechanism, regulatory policies. There is a lot of security issues. Then even the sub-regional initiatives, bits and pieces, are not really making much headway. Recently, you probably may have heard Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal motor vehicle, which currently stalled because Bhutan has not ratified it because of environmental concern. Then on an average, trade cost, just giving you a few numbers, trade cost between India and Pakistan is 2 times more than between US and China, which is so far away. Then we have a SAFTA agreement, South Asian Free Trade Agreement, but it does not address the non-tariff barriers. So you have export subsidies, you have import bans, you have quotas, you have lack of harmonization standards, all those stimulating trade. Then this region's trade has thrived more on low labor costs, which in the long run doesn't help. So in the global value chain, the regional trade's contribution to South Asia is not even 10%, which is almost 60% for Southeast Asia. So the region has not fully optimized sourcing of intermediary goods and input from the neighboring countries and contributing more to the global value chain. Then service investment finance, there is no comprehensive, well-covered policy which will encourage investors to invest in each other's country. Then there is bar to people connectivity. People sitting in this room from India and Pakistan knows what kind of hassle they face when they have to ask for a visa. And not only that, if you're from Bangladesh and Nepal, you go to one of the embassies and you want to go to the other country, they'll ask you, why have you been in Pakistan? And then vice versa. So this is the kind of animosity we live in. These are realities which needs to be brought into surface. Then even just regional phone calls in Southeast Asia, of the international calls they make, 50% happens within the region. In South Asia, just 7%. Very long custom procedures. On an average, it takes 27 days for container cargo to reach the shipping port from the manufacturing gate. Then we have problem with rules of origin, which is supposed to give advantage to exporters by being able to source some inputs in their country within the trade regime. SARC rules of origin are so complex, it's almost impossible for any exporter to take advantage. Then there is a lot of delay in the border because there is not sufficient warehouse facility, not sufficient parking space, not laboratories. So even agricultural food products, there is no cold storage facility. South Asia has not done a good job in terms of having the single window for interface for free trade. Then lack of harmony in clearance procedures because most of the border agencies don't have the kind of understanding protocol required to facilitate shipment of goods. Very low use of inland water. You can see where China uses almost 50%, India uses 3%. And there is no protocol for mutually recognized agreements whereby each country would have recognized other countries' agreement, accepting the assessment and due diligence. Lack of transit agreements, which ups the cost of shipping. One of the reasons why South Asia is not a player in the global trade because of the poor port infrastructure. India and Bangladesh takes 3 times more than a port in Shanghai or Singapore to turn around ocean-going cargo vessel. Then there is high tariff, and of course the historical distrust and discomfort, starting with Pakistan, India, and then with some other countries, doesn't help. You can't trade, and these are some things has to happen in the higher political leadership. We can only from the beneath push the boundaries, but let's face it, somewhere in the political leadership it has to come. Okay, moving on to part 2, we'll have a quick view on the South Asia's energy overall, country-wise overall, and what are some of the existing trading arrangements, some of the recent positive developments, and the potentials which we want to exploit. As you can see, Energy consumption is still not even 1/5 of what happens in Asia Pacific. Demand is growing rapidly. Electrification rate still needs to catch up. And one of the concern is the coal and gas, which are depleting energy sources, on which many of the countries are heavily dependent. I'll come to that very soon. This is more or less how a quick snapshot, how the potential looks like. Hydro, then you have gas, then you have wind. So there is diverse generation source pattern, and of course there is a lot of seasonality factor, to which I will come to how each country can benefit by putting into the feeder the excess sort of power in its domain, where other countries may have deficit in the same time. Now, Jordan, are you 2 slides behind? Well, you can give me the clicker then. You got it? You can give them the clicker if you think that would help. You were saying that you were 2 slides behind, is it? No, it's okay. No, it's okay. Okay. The non-renewable resources, as I have just mentioned, that it's extremely dependent on imported food. For example, if you look at the Maldives and Sri Lanka, they don't have much access to domestic fossil fuels, so they do pay a significant amount on imported petroleum and oil products. And also, for developing countries, it does hurt. And coal, as mentioned by Mr. Ang, that India currently is leading the use of coal not only in region, globally. On renewable energy, the good thing is India has done a good job in terms of promoting the use of renewables, and the cost of renewables has also come down significantly. But again, in terms of the potential and what South Asia has done, there's much to be done yet. Because less than 5% people still rely on renewable energy on a regular source. Country-specific scenario: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India. Some of you already know about it. Afghanistan, the number by World Bank, don't get misled by it, because there's a lot of question of the reliability and quality of energy that goes on. Bangladesh has 75% access, mostly dependent on natural gas, but it has one of the highest penetration of solar home system. Bhutan has 100% access, and again hydropower is the main source, and surplus is being exported to India. India has coal-dependent energy sourcing, and of course currently covers almost 80% and trades with Bhutan, Bangladesh and Nepal. Then we have Nepal, 77% coverage, hydro mostly, but huge peak time shortages. We have Sri Lanka, as I told you, it's highly dependent on imported petroleum products. We have Pakistan, covering about 74%, mostly reliant on gas, coal and nuclear. And Maldives, 100%, but again like Sri Lanka, heavily dependent on imported energy products. And countries like Maldives, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, which are very susceptible to climate changes and sea level rises, needs to do more on the renewable energy side. So that is something will come quickly. So, what are the country-specific energy needs? Sri Lanka, in the near future, will face both peak load generation shortages and base load. And something similar is going to happen with Bangladesh, both peak and base load generation shortage. Interestingly, India 2016 declared had no power deficit, but the cost of energy has been quite high. That's why you see surplus of 3.1 during peak and 1.1 during non-peak hours. And Pakistan mostly sources from gas and currently has 4 gigawatt in power sector and 2 billion cubic feet in natural gas sector. Bhutan is a net exporter, the only country in South Asia, and export hydro to India. Nepal has quite a bit of serious issues, shortfall, and you can see 1400 demand, but in peak season only 850 is generated. Afghanistan has made significant improvement in the last decade. And Maldives again, 300 megawatt from hydro, and current demand is 2000 megawatt, which will become 3000. This is the current scenario. That is, India exports 300 megawatt to Nepal during dry season. Bhutan exports 1450 from hydro. Bangladesh imports 600, which is likely to go up a little bit because there are some current power trading agreement being worked out between the two governments. In a nutshell, it looks like this in terms of potential. Nepal has huge potential to export hydro to both India and Bangladesh. India has potential to Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and Pakistan, coal, diesel, solar, hydro. Then Bhutan, again a very potential hydro power country and can export to India and Bangladesh. And Afghanistan to Pakistan. India is well suited to be the regional energy hub. And it needs to take that leadership. Again, both in the political sphere and other areas, India is by far, in terms of size, scope, far, even all the countries together, put together ahead. So in energy sector also, India can be the ideal choice for regional hub. In 2014, we had the SAC framework for energy cooperation signed, which helps in terms of SAC market for electricity. And on a bilateral level, there is India-Nepal agreement, and Bangladesh has agreed to let India build 6,000 megawatt transmission line through which power can be taken to Assam via Bihar. Bhutan also is in the process of exporting hydropower to India. And there is interconnection which is being worked out in the eastern northern part of Bangladesh, which India pretty much on board. So some momentum has happened between Bangladesh and India in terms of power trade connectivity, and this will hopefully open up new venues for trade export within across the countries. Now, it's also equally important, where are the roadblocks? What are some of the bottlenecks that needs to be removed? Fundamentally, three issues: technical, political, institutional. Most of the countries have outdated grid system, lack of physical infrastructure, lack of centralized power market, lack of standardized harmonized trade. So this region does not have sufficient pipelines either for gas or for transmission lines or for oil. So there's a huge infrastructure shortage. Then of course the political issue is a big issue, because when neighbors don't fully trust each other, it's unlikely they'll open up borders. It's unlikely they will think my next door neighbor can be a consistent, reliable source of supply of energy, which actually is not the case, which I will share with you how other countries and regions in the world have disproved this notion, where adversaries have come together when it means energy. So that's why we call it low-hanging fruits, to which I'll come into very shortly. Institutionally, funding is a big issue. Given the amount of funding needed, government themselves are not well equipped to source this kind of fund. We need private sector involvement. And again, private sector will not get involved. In fact, there are many world-class global entities in countries like India. They would not come in unless in the political spectrum there is a certain degree of certainty, so that they know that the investment goes in has stable return, because these projects are in a longer haul, 20, 30, 40 years. So that is something we need. To do that, we need inter-country policy framework, which currently doesn't exist well in South Asia. So this is how the 360-degree impact looks like. Single fuel dominant economies, more dependence on import, unexploited energy potential, underutilized cross-border trading, and of course the poor regional synergy and growth. This is the sort of cycle we need to break in if we are to make headways in the years to come. Energy for growth, for trade, for peace. One of the good things about energy trade is sometimes it makes the cost of country so high that even if you have countries which may not see eye to eye on a given day, are aware of the backlash they face at home if there's any energy disruption. So in a way, it works as a stabilizing factor. In many parts of the world that has happened. And as far as reactivation of SAC is concerned, I have shared with you why in other areas, whether it's trading arrangement, the ports, the border issues, this will take long times to resolve. And it will need a lot of comfort zone on the security issues. On that end, energy is much easier to drive forward through. You don't need to really open up borders. You just need to let the power lines go in. Then it lowers the risk of conflict. And more importantly, it leads to a more freer trade regime and competitive area within that has not been happening in the commercial trade. So this can hopefully lead to opening of other areas. And what is very important from people like us in track 1.5, track 2 to track 1 to really appreciate the geopolitical significance of energy. Energy is a very different commercial product than anything else. It has enormous ability to influence events around it, and to do that we also must know the smart use of energy trade, which drives both economic growth and development and peace and stability. So that is something, in my opinion, we need to raise more loudly at the levels which matters. Even last year when this ADB Energy Leaders Forum was there, I was telling Asian Development Bank that you need to bring in the senior policymakers who make the decisions. They need to hear more than we need to speak. And I would hope, and I would encourage ASI, when you do next things, make sure you have some policymakers sitting around here so that this is the time to listen. They do not read long reports, let's face it. People don't have time for reports. But when you bring them here for half and one day, they pay attention to what you're saying. If you're really talking about impact, bring people who are making the decisions. So, see what's happening in the world. We know in the even the darkest hour of Cold War days, when Soviet Union was and Europe signed a deal to import gas from Siberia, America was very opposing that deal. Ronald Reagan was in the US White House. But they went ahead and did it, and look what's happening now. Russia is now still the biggest supplier of gas in Europe. And even in the Crimea annexation, one of the sobering efforts from both Russia and Europe was they were very connected by energy to be doing something to disrupt it. Israel very recently have discovered gas in the Leviathan desert, quickly moved around, settled scores with Turkey. As you know probably, there was a commando raid 6 years back when Turkey was trying to send relief in the Gaza. That's led to serious rupture in the relations. But when it comes to energy, Israel moved in, paid compensation, signed a deal, is now about to export gas to both Jordan and Turkey. Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey, from Baku to the southeastern port of Sihan in Turkey, the pipeline, which has helped reduce dependence on Russia and Japan, which used to be considered as the backyard of Russia. And that has led to a lot of Western companies getting involved. Russia and Japan still have issues with Kuril Islands, which Russia, former Soviet Union, annexed after the war. That hasn't stopped Russia from exporting oil to Japan, and there is currently talk on construction of undersea pipelines going from Russia to. So if people in so many parts of the world with unresolved issues can come into sensible economics, South Asia still lags behind. Too much animosity, too much baggage, too much legacy. So some of the risk mitigating strategies, we do have some bilateral agreements which I have shared with you. The SAC framework, which was signed in 2014, does have risk mitigating principles. And one of the good side of the one of the very few good things of common colonial legacy, that most of these countries follow similar technical standard that were built up during British era model. So this in a way has certain degree of uniformity in technical standards. And then of course harmonization of standard reports, that needs to be done if we have to risk, and that will open up door for private sector investors to come in. So what are the policy recommendations? As I said, India can be the regional hub because of the size and location. And there needs to be a study which will look into the power system structure, more importantly the regulatory environment. Like many of these countries have different structure. In many countries there is one ministry for power and energy. In some countries there are two ministries. India and Pakistan have different regulatory authorities for each sector. Bangladesh is one regulatory authority. So there are a lot of mix and matches going on, but if regional trade has to happen, there has to be a coherent regulatory framework which will give comfort zone to the investors. Then of course, as I said, off-season, the peak and off-peak season synchronization. So that some countries which have surplus are in a position to export to countries in deficit and generate that revenue, and the countries in deficit can benefit from the extra surplus. Supply, again, as I mentioned in some of my initial slides, Bhutan and Nepal has enormous hydropower potential, which can be the big game changer in this region. And of course, India needs to connect better with South Asian countries if it's to be a regional hub. And private sector participation is of critical essence, which till this day has not happened to the level worth mentioning. A database is very needed. One of the very frustrating part of South Asia, there are very few governments who either understand or appreciate or do something to have a regular database. So even last month when we were doing this thing in SDG in UN in New York, one of the critical challenges we are facing with database. Energy is too big time investment not to have a database. We need to have a comprehensive database, particularly for cross-border trade. And also the transmission interconnection scenario and what are the financing options. I've already mentioned, particularly dispute resolution mechanism has to be there. And there needs to be harmonization of trading license. For example, after the SAC framework was signed, India did come up with some guidelines on how cross-border trade can be done, but it still hasn't gotten input feedback from other member countries which needs to be done. So it needs to be brought on board. So this is a shortcut of the roadmap, how it looks like. Regional grid connectivity, which is very important to have a stable and reliable energy sourcing. Capacity building is important because energy trade, particularly across borders, is something highly complex, having a lot of implication on financial, technical, regulatory issues. And in a very small way, we at IPAG have been cooperating with Asian Development Bank Institute. And in the last 2 years, we have trained about 60 experts, policymakers from this region. And Jordan, if you can show the picture, the 2 workshops. Last year we did it in Dhaka. This year we just did it in October in Bhutan. So we are just trying to make sure people on the ground are ready, so that if at the political level there is a decision to take it forward, people have understanding of the know-how, how to drive it forward. Learning from the champions, we have South African Power Pool, CASA, who have done a lot of good work. So that is something ESI can always think of bringing some of the people from there to share their experience, how they have done it so well. Then, of course, private sector incentivization, I've spoken quite a bit. Then, synchronized political policy means the political leaders need to come on board. And last, not the least, that if you remember, in the days of Cold War, we had this MAD doctrine, mutually assured destruction. South Asia needs mutually assured benefits. So whether it will become doctrine or not, I don't know, but that is something we need to look into. We have been too much hostage to the quagmire of suspicion and distrust, and that is not something people around the table like you and I can really decide. We can only raise it to the level it matters. And this more or less captures, but to end, just to give you a feel, just to put in a nutshell the things I've spoken about, I'll just finish with the takeaways, which will hopefully give you a quick 2.5 minute glimpse of the things I've tried to cover in the last 20-25 minutes. Jordan.
lot of the critical issues you mentioned are going to come up during the day, and we'll discuss them in more detail. And now I would like to ask Professor Ang to present tokens of our appreciation.
Q&A.
Oh, I see. Sorry, change the program. I would now like to ask Dr. Christopher Len, a senior research fellow from the Energy Studies Institute, to chair a short question and answer session with Professor Khasru. So if you have your questions, please use the microphone or raise your hand.
Yes, I see a hand being raised already, 2 hands. Before I take on the questions, first I'd like to do a very quick summary of what Professor Khasru has said. First, excellent presentation. I gave you 30 minutes and he kept to it. I'm very happy about that. Second, I think what I like about Professor Khasru's message is that when we talk about energy security and energy access in South Asia, he pointed out the need for closer integration, the need to work closer together, but he was also very realistic about the barriers of cooperation, right? And what is also very revealing to me as an outsider is that in terms of this regional integration, it's not just an issue that applies to the energy sector. I was looking at the slide and he presented a case on low integration, and it is taking place at so many different levels. This is quite not an ideal state of affairs, but at the end of his presentation, I like what he showed because it also shows and highlights the potential the region has. As long as there's political will for the different governments to work together, I think Southeast Asia has a lot to benefit with closer cooperation. So thank you very much for that. So without taking too much time, I'll take questions. Yes?
Thank you very much, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairperson. Munir, I want to congratulate you for this presentation, but not just that, for the kind of work that IPAG is doing, not just in Bangladesh, but throughout the region. I'm privileged to be familiar with what you do, and in this, at this very important event, I want to place on record our appreciation for that. Now, going back to cooperation with South Asia and reacting to what the Chair has just said, low integration, yes. You mentioned SAC Amasa, just in passing, but there are other sub-regional organizations not supplanting but coming in place in addition to SAC in the region. Now, some of them, and I just had a bit of this thing with WIMSEC, interaction with WIMSEC in Dhaka recently, seem to be suffering from the lack of preoccupation. Is it, do you sense that there is a possibility that this kind of cooperation on energy can be developed by one of these sub-regional organizations, and if so, which one? And the second question is, I'm sorry I was a bit late because I got the timings a bit mixed up. Myanmar, have you included Myanmar in your broad definition of South Asia? And could you speak a little to the political ramifications of expanding South Asia to include Myanmar at this point in time? Thank you.
Professor, please.
Okay.
Oh,
It's always a pleasure to see you. I mean, some of you, I must share, it's more than just ISIS. He has been a very well-wisher, and he happens to be a younger colleague of my father. So there's a lot of respect that goes on. So I have had the privilege to enjoy his affection and tap into his wisdom that I get free of cost. No, I mean, I'll give you, I mean, you have been in diplomacy and you do have a lot of feathers in your hat. As you know, in my opinion, and I hope I'm not upsetting my Indian friends, this whole intention of BIMSTEC others, the perception is all about bypassing Pakistan. How much it is true, I don't know. It doesn't go well in the region. Other countries do not want to be dragged into this. We have paid enough price of this Indo-Pak, in my opinion, nonsense. And even in my Indian friends' opinion, something they should have been able to find ways to move beyond. So in my opinion, you mentioned BIMSTEC, which is underfunded, understaffed, and in my opinion, almost dead before arrival. I'll be very blunt, because there's no point, using lofty words and dodging around truth. So I'm not sure what future BIMSTEC is. Second thing is, power is where cash is. China is driving forward with all the trillions of dollars sitting on top of it. So don't be surprised if Xi Jinping's rule sees China getting more involved, even on regional connectivity power. China is waiting in the wings. And countries like Myanmar, as you know, China is well entrenched already there. So I'm going from one to the another. So from Myanmar's point of view, if I were a Myanmarese, I wouldn't see much motivation to become part of South Asia, as I would see being motivation part of Southeast Asia or even China, if I were a Myanmarese. So what motivation Myanmar has to be part of a game which hasn't done well in any case? So, now, if SARC has to be a really organization which still exists beyond documents, that's the whole purpose this energy thing came out when I was having talk with ESI-ISAS. This, in my opinion, is the only fruit where you really don't need to open up borders, you just need to do electric lines, power lines going. So in the broader spectrum, I don't think sub-regional will help, because you have seen BBI, already it's cracking because Bhutan. So it has not helped. And pushing the boundaries a little bit more, given the enormous resource India has in terms of its ability, its reach, its size, its economy, technical know-how, some of the best qualified people around the world, India needs to lead from the front. And just last, I think November 24, I wrote a piece on Hindu, which is one of the very well-respected Indian journal, where I reflected on, as ASEAN celebrates 50, the failed decades of SARC. And if I can, I'll give you a copy of it. I've asked my colleague who's coming from the hotel to make a copy so that I can share that. So the spectrum is much bigger than sub-regionalism. The spectrum is much bigger than just one country like Myanmar. So in the bigger scheme of things, given the Rohingya and every situation we are facing now, it's a tricky situation. So until this issue is resolved, Myanmar, it will be difficult to integrate in South Asia, given Bangladesh's own suffering dealing with 1 million people, given the resource, we are not Germany. The resource concern, we know the kind of situation we are facing. So I hope I am being able to respond to your geopolitical concerns and the questions you had.
Sure, the idea was to put the issues forward.
Yes.
Okay. Questions? Yes.
Okay, my first question is that, while analyzing South Asia, do you find it inevitable that you cannot analyze South Asia without looking at the extra-regional organizations? For example, if you look at the CASA 1000 project, it involves Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. And in this project, the advantage that the Central Asia countries have access to electricity in the winter months, whereas countries like Pakistan and Afghanistan, the power deficit comes in the hot months, in the summer months. So the thing here is that while analyzing this, do you feel yourself forced to actually look outside of South Asia to include the extra regional areas? And the second question is, to what extent do you think China's One Belt, One Road program will actually enhance cross-boundary projects? Thanks.
So I guess to summarize in one sentence, you're asking about the role of external actors in facilitating integration in the region. Yeah. Any more questions? Maybe I can take a few more. Yes, the gentleman at the back.
Hi, pardon me if these comments remain questions, but question one, are we force funneling any discussion on energy to just deal with electricity? Is there a possibility we'll be missing the bigger picture if we do just that? Because I do see slides, I do see observations, I do see data and patterns that seem to be funneling all discussion on energy from NTOE out to just kilowatt hours. So is there a broad picture we miss if we continue to do that? And most of the books also do the same. Or is it a deliberate attempt to say, you know, the bulk of energy has to deal with just electricity, so just let's stick to it? It's a layman's question, so bear with me on the technicalities there, or the lack of understanding of technicality. The second is a question that probably got touched upon, and I also saw a couple of observations Professor Khasru made about it, but still, again, are we forcing a discussion on integration to South Asia driven by the topic of the workshop, or the physical integration that's already there as landmass? Or if you were to be given a chance, and let me paraphrase it differently, if you were to be given a chance to go to a select two-country setup in South Asia, would your recommendation be different in terms of integration to take on the countries he was referring to? If you were to step into India, would you go out and say, forget South Asian integration, you can probably do better with Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan? Or are we just coming down to South Asia because of the topic of the workshop? Or you might just be talking to, let's say, Indonesia for petroleum exports, or Malaysia for petroleum exports, and dealing with just energy, and talking to Sri Lanka about that, rather than say integrate into South Asia. Are we force-fitting that into this topic? Even questions, so please bear with me.
Professor Khasru?
Yeah, sure. Responding to the first one, you see, extra-regional issues can always pop up, and to do that, we need a separate session because there are so many regional issues going on, and if you want to bring into play how they might potentially, we need a separate focus as well. So I'm sure there is potential. But the whole purpose of this exercise was to see what South Asia can do. I'm sure there are other countries, bilateral, multilateral level, can come into play a scene. That needs a separate focus altogether. So this whole purpose, and that will answer your question. I'm sure the organizers didn't have any such intention, and correct me, Chris, and impose any particular issue on any particular region or country. This is an intellectual exercise whereby people like me and others, and even there's nothing called layman, everybody has certain degree of knowledge, come together and think which is the most important issue at this point we should discuss. So I'm sure as far as the word imposition goes, I'm pretty sure there's no such thing. It's a matter of opinion, given that nothing is happening, whether this is something we can start with. I'll put it the other way around. Then you mentioned about Belt Road Initiative. Obviously, China under Xi Jinping, since he first made that 2013 speech, has been driving forward. And you know, last May they had this big summit in Beijing, where they brought in a number of heads of state, civil society, think tanks, so on and so forth. And it remains to be seen. And there are a lot of issues still out there. And I wrote a piece on the BRI in the Nikkei Asian Review sometime in May, where I did mention that China has to rise to the level of its economic might to focus on other issues, governance issues, transparency issues, due diligence issues, in which Chinese companies do not have a very good track record, even in a country like Bangladesh. Many of the energy sector projects are dominated by Chinese companies. I don't mind they are giving goods at good prices, but definitely as a citizen I'm not happy with the governance issue that surrounds. So if China has to drive big, this is something which Xi Jinping has started at home, he has to start doing abroad. I mean, they have to rise to certain standards of behavior in commercial transaction. And justifies the means, China has to go beyond that sphere of thought. I hope it in a way answers both of your questions. Secondly, two-country setup. Well, that's what South Asia has been more or less doing. Going, like as I mentioned, Bangladesh, India, some of the things that has happened, which is good. I mean, I'm not saying that nothing multilaterally is not happening should stop us from exploring bilateral. Of course we should. But the question is, if you look at the larger scale and potential, and I'm sure you'll agree it's a pity that in a country which is the highest concentration of poor people in the world can afford to have such kind of animosity. And I tell my Indian and Pakistani friends, you are the only two nations who will celebrate 100 years of animosity within another 30 years. So, I mean, you should look back and look at other countries, what they are doing. You are so hostile. And in the process, many small countries like Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, who could have benefited so much, are being left out. So, same is happening with India and China. A lot of these efforts are replicative. I mean, you have ECI, you have PRI, you have BIMSTEC. In a country of limited resource, in a region limited resources, we can't avoid this duplication. So, answering to your question, I would, as like many of my colleagues, continue to be optimist and push it where we can, and be realist in areas where we have not done a good job. So this session is all about what we can do, than to be lamenting about what we should have, could have done and have not done it. I hope it answers.
And as Chad,
on the first one, on electricity
Sorry.
and energy in general.
on the question with regards to electricity, focus on electricity rather than on, say, oil and gas. You have a-
No, I did mention all the energy sources. If you have looked into my slides, I did touch base, and that was one of the reasons I also went country specific, so that I know that my colleagues around the table are very well versed, even much better than me. But if there was anything laymanish about this, is also to update people like you to know that where we actually stand. So I'll be quite happy to share the slides with you after the session.
And just to clarify, one last round before we wrap up, but before I take more questions, the title of the workshop is South Asia's Challenges and Opportunities in Sustainable Energy Transitions. And we kept it intentionally neutral. It's not about forced integration, but I guess, as you know, anywhere in the world, nobody can do it alone. Nobody can go it alone when it talks about, moving towards low carbon energy systems and talking about low carbon economy. So one of the purposes of this workshop is to bring people together to find whether there are synergies for all these different countries who have very different profiles, how they can work closer together, not necessarily in terms of hard integration, but maybe even just that sharing of experiences. Okay, one last round of questions. Very quickly, I'll give other people a chance first. If you like, you can speak to the keynote after the break. Oh yes, Professor.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Professor, my old friend, for making an excellent presentation. My question to you is around, if you look at it from a normative perspective, I agree that what you say that India should be the lead. But given the real politics of South Asia, is it a feasible option? And my opinion is that had India taken the lead, SARC would have never come up. It is because Bangladesh took the lead, it probably could come up. So that's the situation today. You blame it, whatever, but the fact is that India-Pakistan relation is not going to improve very soon. I'm giving a very different kind of example. Even I go to Pakistan and I go to US Embassy for visa interview, they said, what did you do in Pakistan? So it has got that much problem. And South Asian University has started functioning in Delhi. So the faculty members, the students, when they come to India, what is the problem? The problem is that the campus is not yet built, there is no hostel, there is no quarters for the teachers. But nobody in Delhi is willing to rent out their property for these faculty and students. So this has got up to that level. So even, I know the government, other kind of problems could be there, but when the people-to-people, relationship is not something so good about, then it's difficult. So given that, you also said that if rest of South Asia can integrate better, if that doesn't happen, and to me, I think from I come from a region which is close to Bangladesh, and for me it is like, because we have got partition, because Nepal, India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, they are not integrated enough. That can be small region from our outside perspective, but think about the number of people there. So if they can benefit by getting integrated, no matter what happens in the Western part.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so for the rest of the workshop, there will be a lot of opportunity for free-flow discussion. We can keep the comments until then. So just a very quick response for Professor Khasru before we wrap up, because we're running out of time.
So for me,
Yeah, any closing statements? Comments?
I would tend to put it this way. If you go by facts, to be very honest, I think most of you agree, we have more reasons to be pessimist than to be optimist, because what has happened in last 30 plus years. But optimism is not an option, it is something we have to live with. So despite that, given the huge potential, not only energy, in other areas. I'm sure in other workshops you'll hear more about people-to-people connectivity and trade and other things which we have not been able to exploit. The region needs to rise, and the reason actually, just to quickly allude to what Professor Nanda had said, in my opinion, the bigger party, the bigger country has the bigger responsibility. You cannot shy away from the fact is many a times, unfortunately though, even when SAC was created, India was vehemently against any bilateral issues being raised in this forum. Because from Indian perception, and I was a student at that time, even in the corridors of SAC, I remember the whisper I was hearing outside the meeting room, India thinks it's India versus them. Even when SAC was created, when I was just a student. So that is something is far beyond our domain, but our political leadership have to rise to the occasion. And what you have said is very correct, unfortunately though, the visa thing you mentioned. So how it can be resolved is something we still have to be patient. I'll give you a simple example. This Hindu article, which I just shared with you, which went. When I was getting replies from your readers, it was saddening me how a significant portion of, not that I'm a fan of Pakistan, we have a lot of issues with Pakistan, but even then, a significant portion of letters, the sheer amount of hostility, the question that were asked, how can we isolate Pakistan and then do this? How can we? This is the prevailing mindset. And if this is the prevailing mindset at grassroots level that is being growing, we have a problem here. When I was reading those letters, a significant portion were asking, dear, it's a brilliant piece of writing, I enjoyed reading it, it has a lot of information, can you please suggest how can we isolate Pakistan and do this and that? So in my opinion, in my humble opinion, I'm too small to even suggest that. Political leadership, even the week before I was in Hong Kong, in the Chinese Economic Summit, and Parvez Musharraf was there. And even in his speech, at some point, it had to come down Indian Ocean and why he thinks India is trying to make it an ocean meant for India. So from top to bottom, that level of distrust, animosity prevails. This is not Bangladesh's agenda. This is an agenda both the countries need to find out. And in my last remarks in that article I wrote, if SAC has to succeed, India and Pakistan has to find a way to come together to lead it from the front. That would be my concluding remarks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you join me in giving Professor Khasru a round of applause? And I'd like to invite Professor Ang to give a small token of appreciation on behalf of ESI and ISAS to Professor Khasru.
Last but not the least, I was being very blunt and frank because frankly, I'll conclude by this, we in South Asian culture have a serious issue of dodging around the truth. It does not help. Unless we have learned to call spade a spade, we will be in this quagmire for decades to come. We need to speak out the truth, no matter how unpleasant it is. Only then the recovery will start. And these are the places where we should do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we take a short break, and let's be back in the room at 10:35. 15 minutes break. Thank you.